Hello and thanks for stopping by. This is Circus Convoy for the Atari 2600, released in 2021 by Audacity Games, and I'm playing this game from a purchased ROM on a Retron 77. There are a few packages of the games for sale. The cartridge doesn't like to work with the Retron 77 as of now, but it definitely works in a straight-up Atari console if you have one. One of the packages lets you buy the ROM as well. This is a full big box cartridge release of a new Atari 2600 game. When I heard that David Crane and Gary Kitchen were releasing new games, I of course ordered immediately. I haven't bothered collecting boxes for my Atari games yet, but I am excited to get this one, and I'm certainly going to keep it pristine on a shelf. Like I said, this is a new release, and it's a full-on release. We're talking a fully printed box with the classic Atari-style Activision cartoon artwork. The cartridge itself is pretty much in the same style of the old Activision cartridges. It's the same rough shape and size, of course, but they're just no little ridges in the top and bottom. Like the old Activision games, you could sort of stack the carts right on top of each other. This doesn't have those little ridges, that's all. And that's fine with me, because I'm going to leave my cart in its beautiful box. It also has full-color instruction manual with a warranty insert card. David Crane and Gary Kitchen made tons of Atari classics from back in the 80s. These are the games that I used to play a lot. David Crane made Pitfall, which of course is very famous, and Gary Kitchen made Keystone Capers, which was one of my favorites, and the first video I actually uploaded on YouTube. They apparently have plans to make more games, and I'm on board. It also doesn't hurt that this game is actually a really good Atari game. In Circus Convoy, you play Andre the Magnificent, who's a circus strongman and a master of disguise. You are part of a caravan, and your circus convoy is moving on to the next show. Apparently, someone has sabotaged the show, and they've scattered circus props and dangers all around the convoy. You need to work at this game to collect all the props, and then you have to go visit all the sideshows to make sure everything is still working. The basic controls are pretty simple. You press the fire button to jump, and you pull down to duck. You also have an inventory screen, which is huge for Atari games. You pull down on the joystick and press the fire button at the same time to open up your inventory. When your inventory is open, you can move your joystick left and right to select what you want, and you press the fire button to equip whatever the item is. Some items you can only use in certain locations, and others you could possibly waste at the wrong time. Really, the game is you doing two different things. First, you're running around and surviving on top of the caravan, picking up stuff as you go. And then there's you finding, accessing, and doing well with all the mini-games. Running around the top of the caravan, you're going to need to collect props and avoid a bunch of dangers, and we're talking, there are going to be snakes, there are going to be problems with you accidentally jumping in the gap between the caravan, there are going to be chattering teeth, a giraffe head at one point, more snakes, and that's just the first 10 minutes or so. Let's talk about the props here. First, you can collect stars. They're not exactly props, I don't think, but they help gauge how well you're doing in the game. There's a whole bunch of them. You can find colored keys, which will open the colored equivalent lock, I guess. There are also bombs to blow open certain things, and there are bricks. You can set bricks in certain areas so you can stand on the bricks and jump higher. There are parachutes that you can use for gliding in between screens and over gaps. There are also binoculars that let you see screens ahead of you at a time, or behind really. There's also a gas can. You can utilize the gas can, that's pretty important too. So there's this great element of you figuring out how to use these items, and where. And this is how you get through different parts of the convoy. You'll need to figure out where items need to be used, and in this regard it's sort of a puzzler if you think about it. Some things to use are much more obvious than others. I figured out a place to use the bricks pretty much right away, but past that, it was kind of trial and error to figure out what to use. When I first figured out where to use a bomb, I was elated. I wasn't expecting to have to puzzle things out in the game, at least on the outside. I really thought it would be just a straight sort of run and jump platformer for the most part, but it's so much more interesting with all these puzzle elements added. Also, in these convoys, as you're making your way around, you'll need to find and access the circus sideshows. You need to play them, and when you play them, you'll get stars added to your score. It took me a bit to understand what was going on enough to actually make it to the first minigame. It's not like you just plug the game in, run 3 screens, and you jump into a minigame. Nope, it takes more time than that. You have to figure out what to do, where to go, and actually traverse a whole bunch of screens to actually make it to the first minigame. Basically, you're solving a platforming puzzle to get to each minigame, and it's sort of memorizing that sort of progression. The first minigame that I got to was the duck shoot, and it's pretty much exactly like I would expect a duck shoot game to be. You position a reticle with the controller and you press the trigger to shoot. You're given a whole screen of obstacles and get shooting. Honestly, I've been looking at a bunch of Atari 2600 games over the past few months, and this one duck shoot minigame, this one segment is actually better than some of the full games that I've seen. Getting used to how prop works in this game is probably the biggest part, at least for me early on. Unless you have a walkthrough of this game, you're going to be picking stuff up, and you need to figure out the best place to try to use these items to advance. I know after you've done these once or twice, it's just remembering what to do and where, but until you know what that is, it's going to be trial and error until you figure out what you need to do. I got through a few things initially. The bricks, I managed to figure out the bricks, the parachute, and eventually a bomb. The thing that stuck me at first was the fuel. It turns out you have to run to the cab of the convoy that you're currently on. If you're at the cab, you can use the fuel, and that'll speed your convoy up, and it'll connect to the convoy ahead of you. That's pretty useful. I was really running around doing a whole bunch of stuff, always to the right, and eventually I'd get to the end of the convoy and I wasn't sure where to go because I couldn't seem to bridge the gap with a parachute. As it turns out, you need to go back to the front of the caravan at this stage and go forward with the gas can. I have to say, for a modern Atari 2600 game that uses the original Atari 2600 programming limitations, this game is really awesome. I can only imagine how well this game would have performed if it was released at the time that the system was actively being sold. I bet it would have done great. Well, that's all I have today for Circus Convoy for the Atari 2600. What a fun game, a modern game in 2021. Thanks for giving this video a look, and I'll catch you on another one.